突如現れた巨人たちによって人類の大半は食われた。生き残った人類は巨大な壁を作り平和に暮らしていた。
壁の外は巨人だらけだって言うし。
本気で信じてんのか巨人なんて。この100年以上見たやつは誰もいない。
Hello and welcome to Film Rant. This week we go a little off the beaten track and review the live action Attack on Titan Part 1. Now before I start, I'll say that I went into this film 100% blind. I've been requested to review this, so I thought I would. I'd like to state that I don't watch any anime. I've tried various shows and it's just not my thing, so I've not seen the anime at all. The only thing I know about this movie is what I read in the plot synopsis, which told me a fucking huge spoiler, so fuck you whoever wrote the plot synopsis. But generally, I've reviewed this film as somebody who was totally out the loop, which is ideal, as apparently director Shinji Higuchi wanted to make the film as accessible as possible to outsiders. There'll be points and questions I'll ask in this review which will have some of the anime watchers screaming at the screen, as they'll probably know the answers, but that's all part of the fun. Anyway, if you haven't seen the movie, this review will contain spoilers, so watch it and then come back, because you know, I could do with the views. As always, we'll start with the characters. There's a lot of characters in this movie, so I'll only focus on the main four: Eren, Mikasa, Armin, and of course, the Titans. So, this is Eren. He's your typical renegade character. He's a good guy, but doesn't much care for rules. At the beginning, he's a rebel without a cause, but once the Titans attack, his cause is to kill them all. I've seen hundreds of characters that are like Eren: Captain America, Han Solo, and Malcolm Reynolds, to name a few. Those characters together don't seem to have much in common, but they all bend the rules and actively seek adventure. Deep down, they're all good people too, like Eren. Eren is a good character, but in part 1 he doesn't really offer anything to make him stand out from others who fit his profile. Mikasa is Eren's romantic interest at the start of the movie. We don't see that much of her before the Titans attack. She seems a little sheepish and you can clearly see the romantic connection between her and Eren. When the Titans finally do attack, we see her risk her life to save the baby of a random woman. Then she mysteriously disappears, like Macaulay Culkin's career. Unlike Macaulay Culkin though, she doesn't reappear as a drug-ridden mess that wouldn't look out of place on Jeremy Kyle. She reappears as a badass ninja-like stone-cold Titan killer. She can flip about and take down Titans as cool and easy as Raiden can take down those Metal Gear cows. Again though, there's no exploration to her character. She goes from being sheepish and quiet to cold-blooded killer and quiet. It's a monumental change in character, but it's just not explored, not in part 1 at least. The same can be said for Armin. Now I'll be honest, what's the point of Armin? I mean, he might come into play in part 2, but for this movie Armin may as well have been Eren's pet dog. He's barely ever on screen, he doesn't say too much, he offers nothing to the story, he's never really there during the big points of the movie. In fact, it seems the only reason he's there is to be rescued by Eren in the end battle. But I'll get onto that a little bit later. I've used this term before, but Armin is about as much use as Anne Frank's drum kit. So that just leaves us the Titans. Boy oh boy, the Titans. I actually like the Titans as villains. They're basically giant zombies. They are a legitimate threat, which makes a nice change. Whenever they were on screen attacking, I did feel an immediate danger for the characters. They're brutal, unrelenting, and fairly unstoppable. However, they only seem to be a legitimate threat because the plot places blocks for all the obvious ways you could think to take down a Titan. The film explains that the only way to kill a Titan is to cut out its nape, but firearms can't do this, only swords can. Why? I'm pretty sure a fucking missile to the neck is enough to kill anything. Yeah, it's hard to get behind a Titan because they're so huge and can easily pick you up and eat you, but we see the Survey Corps has many soldiers. A few could easily get into a decent position to send a rocket full of death into a Titan's nape, especially since they move so fucking slow. Maybe this is explained more in the anime, but it seems like a really cheap plot element in the movie. Now we'll get on to the script. Firstly, I want to say that as an outsider, Attack on Titan establishes its world quite well at the start. It tells you only the essential details you need to know to establish the scene. It's not like Lord of the Rings or Thor, where it basically explains every last detail before the adventure begins. It basically just says, right, so there was these mad fuckers called Titans who came and destroyed humanity. Some lucky twats managed to survive, and luckily one of them had read Game of Thrones, so they decided to build a huge fuck-off black wall to keep the bastards out. Titans have now buggered off for 100 years. That's enough for me. That really is all I needed to know for now, actually. Hopefully, the questions that arise from that small amount of info are answered in the movie, but unfortunately, that's where it falls apart. But I've got a whole section on questions a bit later. This film is very weird, because it cuts out so much stuff that I would think needs to be there, but I actually like that it isn't. Following on from introducing the world with little info, I'll say that there's barely any character setup either. We are introduced to Eren, Mikasa and Armin, then within 10 minutes the Titans turn up for their bait. From there, the movie is pretty much an all-out war film, so we have barely no insight into Eren, Mikasa or Armin's life before the Titans attack. It restricts a potential character development arc, and it doesn't offer any setups for inevitable payoffs. I sort of liked it though. Like the intro, I like that it gave us little information about the characters at the start and jumped straight in at the deep end. Hopefully we'll see more into the characters and learn more about their past and personalities, but unfortunately that's where it falls apart. Again. In part 1 at least, we don't explore Eren, Mikasa or Armin's character at all. They're too busy fighting titans for most of it, to be honest, so there isn't much time for conversation. But it would have been nice to give the characters more depth and to allow us to see into their past and know what their deal is. I feel no emotional connection to any of them whatsoever. Obviously I want them to beat the Titans because, you know, I'm not a complete fucking savage, but if any of them were to die on the road to victory, as of now, I wouldn't really care. When Mikasa is revealed to be the goddess, I really didn't see that coming. The goddess is what the soldiers call this powerful female leader who can absolutely wreck Titans. They aren't kidding either. Her introduction is pretty cool. We see her jumping about with her omnidirectional mobility gear, or ODMG for short. This device enables her to ninja her way around the Titans to get to their nave and slice them apart. It's all pretty neat and badass, and I didn't guess that she would be Mikasa, so when the reveal came, I was pleasantly surprised. I should have seen it coming though. The setup was there. I'm sort of annoyed at myself for not seeing it. Anyway, Eren asks how the fuck she managed to escape the last time we saw her, which was when a Titan was about to attack her and a newly adopted baby. She simply explains that the baby was eaten, which is a pretty grim image. Then she very dramatically says, "So was I," and shows Eren a pretty hefty bite mark worthy of Luis Suarez. Then her mysterious partner Shikishima, who I also know absolutely fuck all about, steps in and ruins the story. Never does the film explain how she survived getting bitten and or nearly eaten completely by a Titan. Okay, I get it, some things you leave for part 2, but questions are starting to mount up. Moving on! Eren finds himself another romantic interest in Hyana, while Armin finds romance in the potato girl. No, seriously, that's what they call her, because this girl has some crazy fetish for potatoes. I mean, she fucking annihilates them. I've never seen someone eat mashed potatoes so fast in me life. She also eats them raw, which to me is absolutely lifting, but each to their own I guess. We eventually find out that Sasha is her real name. We don't see that much of her, but what we do see is usually Armin helping her out in some way. He gives her potatoes, which equates to your average flowers and chocolates in her world. She fucking loves it. Anyway, Eren follows Hyana into danger when she hears a crying baby in a Titan-ridden area. Eventually they find a few moments of peace together and have a heart-to-heart. They chat about their families and how she's a single mother. I'm happy. Finally I get to see some character depth and interaction. Without even taking him to dinner first, Hyana throws herself at Eren and asks, "Will you be father to my daughter?" Whoa there, love! Girls, if you ever want to turn a guy off after knowing him for a day or so, those are the words to say. Anyway, Eren is saved from providing child support as a Titan breaks through the wall, grabs her, and has her for his breakfast. Her death is fucking brutal. Eren and her were having a nice moment when suddenly she's ripped apart and turned into breakfast in bed for one lucky Titan. I love this. It made sure you never knew all the characters were safe and could be killed at pretty much any time. Big plus there, Attack on Titan. There are certain characters who I feel were there purely to achieve something in the plot. I mentioned with Armin before that I feel he was only there to be saved, which in this film at least, he is. He does nothing, says nothing, and basically is nothing until Eren rescues him from the jaws of a Titan. I guess he has a bigger part to play, but for this movie he may as well have been a ghost. The same can be said for Dill and Fuxi. They aren't in the film much, but we learn that they are a couple who are madly in love but find themselves thrust into war against the Titans. That's good. It's horrible and tragic to see war tear people apart like that, but that is literally all they're there for. Tragedy. We never see them fight, we don't see them talk to anybody, and they don't seem to do any sort of meaningful action until the plot dictates that they need to. Fuxi is killed, and this leads Dill to gather the only explosives humanity has left and go on a mad rampage to the Titans. The explosives are first hijacked by an unknown thief, who I still don't know the identity of, before Dill thinks, "Yeah, I'm not having you stealing me thunder give us them explosives." She then drives the truck into a Titan's leg, and boom, she's gone too. So Dill and Fuxi ultimately achieve nothing except fucking up the entire plan by wasting the only explosives humanity has left in some shitty attempt at revenge. Yes, your situation was tragic, but didn't be so fucking selfish, man. There's a point in the movie where Eren has had one of his legs bitten off and Armin is grappling with the jaws of a Titan. Mikasa then finds herself on a rooftop, looking at Eren struggle to move. We see in the background a Titan moving towards her. She then has to decide whether to help Eren or attack the Titan. She chooses to attack the Titan. This moment could have been made so much better if she had to choose between saving Eren or Armin. She has a relationship with both of them. The audience knows both of them. It would have been brilliant to watch. I'm gutted that situation never came up, but I guess both characters are needed for the overall plot. Now, if you've seen my Fantastic Four review, you'll know that I criticised the shit out of that for having no second act. Similarly, Attack on Titan has no third act. I know it's a two-parter, so obviously everything can't be resolved, but I just feel it needs a third act as a standalone film. Maybe they should have had to deal with a certain issue before accomplishing the final objective, and that could have served the issue to tackle in part 1. Instead, the film ends just after Eren turns into a Titan, which was the plot synopsis spoiler by the way, and goes mental on the other Titans. We see him collapse and his human body is rescued from the evaporating corpse. End. I feel that I just needed a bit more after that to round off the film. Okay, the battle is over. Explore a bit more what just happened and talk to Eren about him turning into a Titan. Then end on Eren realising he has this monstrous power to transform at will into a Titan, and then that leads into the next part nicely. We see that the Survey Corps won the battle and can have a bit of a breather, and we also know they now have a deadly tool to use in the next film. The ending was just a bit abrupt for me, and I would have liked to see a small third act. Now we'll get on to the technical aspects of the movie. I thought the soundtrack and sound design was very odd. It was good, I just found it a bit strange. I'm not even sure why. Maybe it was the way it was used. There's music at times when perhaps there shouldn't be. Sometimes the music is a little too dramatic for the situation too. However, this is very common in Asian cinema, so it wasn't any real surprise. When Mikasa is introduced as a new badass Stone Cold Killer character, along with Shikishima, I loved the editing. It cuts between squad leader Hans explaining to the Survey Corps how to kill a Titan, and Shikishima and Mikasa actually doing it. There was just something very cool about this, and I loved it as a way to introduce a character. It really solidified that these characters know what they're doing, and they're going to be essential in killing the Titans. More stuff like that in part 2, please. Attack on Titan has some very nice imagery at times. There's a shot near the very start of the movie where Eren, Armin and Mikasa all look out towards the wall. It's a truly beautiful shot, and very reminiscent of anime. Well, what I've seen of it at least. They stand a few meters away from each other on different planes, and the landscape is a joy to look at. There might be problems with the script, but Attack on Titan is a good looking movie, even if the CGI isn't quite up to scratch. But I'd assume that on a bigger budget, the CGI would be nailed. Most of the Titans look absolutely fucking ridiculous. A lot of them look literally like giant humans with less than an adequate amount of brain cells. A lot of them are also sporting an expression that a paedophile would have if they found the key to an orphanage. But then you have the Titans that look like this. Now that's batshit scary. Some of the Titans are legitimately terrifying looking things, and I prefer those Titans as it instilled some element of fear. The other ones are still deadly, but when they just look like an overly grown human it looks a bit ridiculous and you don't really see them as a monster. As I mentioned earlier, the Titans are basically giant zombies that love to eat humans as much as Sasha likes to chow down on some shepherd's pie. To accompany this, Attack on Titan contains zombie imagery, but not in the way you'd expect. It shows the survivors in zombie-like situations as opposed to the Titans. There's a scene where the survivors barricade themselves in a wooden building and lock the doors. Eren escapes and sees 3 Titans tearing the roof off. Not in the mental rave kind of way. They tore the roof off! But the destructive monster kind of way. The survivors are trapped inside and we see them clawing out between the bars of the door trying to escape. It's very reminiscent of zombies clawing to get their meal. Eventually, they're all splattered to death, and their blood oozes out from below the door as if the Titans just raided a Ribena factory. Which leads me on to my next point. Attack on Titan is quite a gory film. Now, it doesn't quite reach the heights of The Walking Dead or more brutal horror films, but it does enough to make you wince a few times. Most of the gore comes from watching the Titans devour their meals. We see them bite into humans and literally rip them apart. We see one guy ripped apart from each limb, like pulling the legs off a spider. I'll be honest, I fucking hate gore. It's totally unnecessary, and I think people who enjoy watching it need to get a damn psych eval. But in this instance, it served a certain purpose. It showed us just what the Titans are capable of. It's because of the gore that we can view them as the terrifying monsters they are. It makes them somewhat real. So, for Attack on Titan, I'll get past my anti-gore beliefs and say it was very well used. Now I'll end on the part that will inevitably leave you cussing and shouting obscenities at your screen as you hear me list off a load of questions I have. Most of the questions are to do with the film specifically, but some can probably be answered by the anime or manga. But remember, this film needs to be able to stand on its own 2 feet, without prior knowledge. Anyway, those questions are: is there any humanity outside the wall? Where is this city? Why not have people watching on the wall, not just looking at the wall? Why does everybody want to save Armin, but aren't that bothered about other people? Are Titans controlled by / born from the people they eat? How did Eren become a Titan? Why did the Titans attack? Where do the Titans come from? Where does the Survey Corps get their tech from? When did they have time to build a giant wall? What was the big giant Titan at the start? Remember, I'm an outsider. I should be able to find out the answers to these questions without having to look at the manga or anime. It should be in the film. After all, Higuchi wanted the film to be accessible to outsiders, so he needs to make sure these kinds of questions are answered. Now I'm aware that last one will probably be answered in part 2, as I get the impression that Titan is the top bollocks of the whole Titan community, but the rest are just some of the questions I was left with at the end of this movie. I know this is part 1, but to be a part 1, it also needs to be able to stand on its own. It should be a film in its own right. It should leave some questions unanswered for part 2, but also answer a lot of the ones raised by its own plot. Take Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 for example. That movie is just a massive setup for Part 2, but it also has its own plot and sets up and answers questions that are formed within that one movie. Attack on Titan doesn't do this. It simply sets the scene for Part 2 and leaves you with a lot of unanswered questions. And that is why, ultimately, Attack on Titan Part 1 fails. I like the film for its action sequences and good monsters, but it just left me with a few too many unanswered questions, so that when the credits rolled, I felt like I'd been robbed of some form of resolution. Answers to the questions of, where did the Titans come from? Where did the Survey Corps get the tech from? And why not have people watching on the wall, not just looking at the wall, could have easily been answered in Part 1. It just leaves too much to be desired. But Attack on Titan Part 1 does allow an outsider to access it quite easily and comfortably, and I will watch Part 2, if only just to get them damn questions answered. Attack on Titan Part 1 gets 3.5 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.
僕たちが失敗したらそれで人類は